Yeah, sorry. That was the blue sheet going by. We'd still like some confirmation from some of the remote people that you can hear what is about to transpire.
Yes, I'd like to start the meeting, but I'd like confirmation.
Good.
There we go.
I got an answer
Tim.
back from Tim. Good deal.
My
Tim,
co-chair has responded, so that means we're good. So this is the the DMARC working group session. This is the DMARC working group session. If you meant to be in TLS, it's a long way away in another galaxy, I think.
Yes.
And Alexei says you're not going to miss anything there anyway, because we know the outcome, so you might as well be here. I'm Barry.
I'm Kurt.
Kurt is our document editor who's taking the chair seat because we don't have another chair in the room, but Tim is on Jabber and MeetEcho and whatever and is all ready to stick his oar in if necessary. So, my standard thing, note the note well. This is the new note well, so read it thoroughly because it's vastly different from the previous note well.
And you're actually giving something up by taking this one on, right?
Anyway, again, the note well is a reminder and a summary, and there's a whole bunch of BCPs that are actually behind it. But the bottom line is be sure you make your disclosures and act properly in IETF meetings and all of that stuff. Next slide.
But this is not the Huawei
Sorry.
note well, right?
This is not the Huawei note well. It just has our logo on it because I used the company template when I made this. But anyway. All right. Here's the agenda. Does anybody have any issues with the agenda? Okay. Yeah. Does anybody have any issues with the agenda? Anything they think? I don't break down the next steps on this part of the agenda, but when we get to the next steps, there's a whole sub-agenda for that. Are there questions or comments about the agenda? Okay, then. So that 5 minutes was quick. We're now going to get right into the document status and seeing where we are on finishing up this spec. So let's do that.
Yep. Okay, so I just released a -12 version yesterday because they opened up the, Sunday evening, I guess it was. That was yesterday.
Imagine.
And it's been pointed out to me that a number of the proposed changes were accidentally overlooked. So I already have some tweaks to do on that. Otherwise, the main changes were taking all of the outstanding questions and moving them into tickets in the ticket tracker now. So I'd invite people to look through the ticket tracker and comment and respond to the various things there. The biggest one is semi-structural. And that is the proposal to take the reporting section, which is now section 7.3, and pull that out into its very own document. Is there a sense from folks in the room whether it's worth doing that? It's very interim, and it probably will be interim for some period of time. So either in the room or remotely, any opinions about whether that's a good idea to fork it out into another document or leave it where it sits? Yeah, sure. I'll relay it for the stream. Alexi's asking a question.
Did somebody ask for it to be split up? Asks Alexei.
Yes, there was a suggestion on the mailing list quite some time ago that because what was in the document was interim and we expected to flesh it out in further detail later, that putting it out in a separate document would make it easier to revise.
Okay. Tim Wasinski, since it's experimental and not sort of standards track, you could do that or just move it to the appendix. But I like moving it to a separate document because then you can sort of rev it regularly. So.
Sure.
Jim?
Hi, Jim Fenton. I like the idea of it being in a separate document largely because when people say, I've implemented ARC or I've implemented DMARC, well, DMARC's already done. But when I've implemented ARC, it's important to know whether they've implemented reporting or whether they've implemented some sort of an enforcement mechanism. And I find a lot of the characterizations about DMARC, that I've implemented DMARC, I don't know what that means.
Right.
I would like that to be more clear going forward.
Okay.
This is Barry. Do you not think that if the reporting stuff is in the main document, that if somebody says I've implemented ARC, it means I've implemented reporting because it's part of the main document?
The problem that we've seen with DMARC.
This is Kurt speaking.
Sorry. The problem that we've seen with DMARC is that the specification as it currently stands has at least 3 different components. One is I publish and expect people to adhere to my published policy. The second one is I enforce upon ingress said policies or do something with them. And the third relatively independent component is I generate reports having to do with the traffic that I receive. And so people say that I've implemented DMARC and may have only done one of those 3 things.
Okay, this is Barry again. That seems odd to me that if 3 things are in the document, 3 things are what you mean when you say you've implemented it, to me. So to me,
in practice, that hasn't happened.
Separated it out, you're in fact saying that this is optional and I don't want it, and I may not want it, and I guess that's fair. But
I think the problem is that there's DMARC for senders and there's DMARC for receivers, and essentially it's been conceptualized that way and advertised that way. So, but yeah, we can separate it out, and that's easy enough to do, and allows us the freedom to revise it independently.
Okay.
And just as a point of reference, a similar thing was done with MTA STS, where the STS mechanism and the reporting mechanism, which had started out as being in the same document, ended up being in separate ones. And so that is being done elsewhere.
Okay, John?
Yeah, with DMARC, the problem isn't so much the labeling, the problem is the work. I've implemented DMARC checking on my inbound mail, but actually putting everything in a database and then summarizing the database every day, blah, 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 all that's a bunch of extra work, which I will do someday. It seems to, and I sympathize with the problem. I don't think putting in separate documents will solve anything because people will still say I've implemented ARC. If you care, why don't we add a section that just, defines, ARC signing, ARC chain validation, and then you say, come up with snappy names for the parts that people might do separately, and then you can just say, and then you can recommend, you can label your stuff. I've implemented ARC chain validation, and I think that is at least as likely to get people to admit what they did as to put them in separate documents.
Okay, Dave Crocker. While valid, the problem with Jim's point is that it requires making each aspect of a service separate. DKIM publishing signing versus DKIM reception validation. DMARC has 3 components, so it needs 3 docs. I think the original focus on expected rate of change is more helpful.
Okay. So actually, I think maybe this discussion around DMARC, we can defer to the section where we're talking about what to do with DMARC and get it on the standards track. And that maybe snappy names is part of the answer there.
All right. Is it perhaps reasonable to leave it in the document for this experimental release with the idea that we might take it out separately for a standards track version? I
can go either way.
Where I'm looking is I would rather
Yeah.
have minimal extra work before we publish this,
Okay.
unless there's a really good reason to go there. But we can continue that discussion on the list, but I think we have the all in one while experimental +1, says Tim Dragon.
Yep.
All right, so Dave says the benefit of keeping it in a single doc is likelihood readers will see it, which I agree with. That's what I was trying to get at.
Okay. So we'll stick, we'll take it to the list, but it sounds like the general thought is keeping it in the doc while experimental is
Well, the general thought is keeping it one for now is what some of us say, but revisit the issue of splitting it out if we go standards track. When
Yep.
we go standards track, we hope to do that.
Yep.
Another from Dave Crocker, each subfunction should get an official name. I agree with that as well.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
other things around the ARC protocol document is that we now have an explicit dependency on 7601 BIS, which we will come to shortly in the status of other documents section. So because we have fobbed some of the text and structure and things like that off to 7601 BIS, I don't think we can officially publish this until we kind of co-publish 7601 BIS. Murray, is that your understanding?
Yep.
Okay. That was a yes from Murray in the audience. Otherwise, content-wise, I've not really had any feedback of objections to the content. It's all been around making the explanation of art clearer, especially for people who are coming to the work de novo. And it would be great if anyone does have content objections to raise them really soon, because with the exception of some minor tweaks, I think that we're pretty close for a last call.
Okay.
Alexi's coming to the mic.
And I'll add a comment from Seth Blank. He's been having issues with Meet Echo. So he says he feels strongly on the other side with separate docs, but will save his commentary for the list.
Right.
So.
Yeah, Alexei, I just reviewed the diff from, around Singapore time to now, and I found a lot of, most of new text to be very helpful and talking about limitations as well as explanations about the thing. I think it's definitely going in the right direction.
Yeah, our question is, how close are we to having something that we can release? Yeah, thanks. Any other observations from people, comments? Otherwise, please look at the tickets that have been newly filed, make comments on the tickets or make them on the list, and we'll transport them back onto the issue tracker. And we'll try to wrap this up
I'll also say
by the middle of next month. How's
Yeah,
that?
I'll also say expect this is 12. Expect a 13
Yep.
very soon, because we lost some of this weekend's updates that
Yep.
we'll get in.
Yep.
Seth says, only other question is if anything is missing from the experimental considerations section that should be reflected in the doc for last call. Seth, do you have any specific?
No, I think he's inviting people that if they want to add any further considerations in there to
Okay.
voice them soon.
Okay.
I think that's what you're asking, Seth. Is that correct?
Yes. Invitation if anyone thinks there are missing items.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I think we're done with that topic. Yes?
Yep. I think
All
so.
Good. Other documents, the usage document.
So the usage document has only had some minor tweaks along the way. I suspect that it's still a bit of a hodgepodge. And I'm not quite sure how heavily we need to pursue it at this point, because we'd really like to get some real practical experience and then be able to codify that into the usage document. I'm not sure how much this overlaps with the DMARC usage document.
Right. So the question that this brings up is whether, as we're putting forth an experimental ARC, do we want to put out an experimental usage document or save the usage document for after we've gotten experimental experience? Does anyone have a thought on that? Tim is waving his hand.
You want that, as someone who does a lot of operational stuff, you want that usage document after you've collected some useful experimental data. I figure that would be my.
That was my thought too.
Yep.
That's Tim Wasinski there.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
So I will put that out on the list also to confirm, and we'll plan to just continue revising the draft with ongoing learning through the experimental period, and then have something toward the end that we can put out. And Seth comments on the Jabber channel. He agrees for post-experimental. Tim is saying, put a note in the experimental doc that we are actively seeking data. Okay,
Good idea.
point taken. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Any other comments on the usage document? We'll come back to it if there are. Let's move on to wait, Murray.
No, I'm ready for the next one.
Oh,
Okay, so moving on to
Murray's got his finger on the
the
trigger.
multiple signing algorithms.
Trying to keep us moving here.
We'll lead off with Murray. Then.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I
Oh.
was looking at 7601.
He's jumping ahead. Okay, so the multiple signing algorithms is an attempt to deal with the impending release under decrypt of elliptic curve signatures. It is secondary, and the reason we put it in a separate document is because we aren't really expecting it to be a live issue for some period of time yet, and we wanted to be able to move ARC with a single RSA SHA-256 algorithm forward. And John Levine is coming to the mic.
Yeah, the other reason to make it a separate document is that it is slightly incompatible with with all the code that people have written
Correct.
so far. And given that the current stuff is an experiment, I concur with everybody who says ship it and see what we don't like, and then we can fix it all at once.
Yep. So we'd invite people to look at it, and we'll have a separate thread of discussion around how we deal with that, as you say, slight incompatibility with the current code bases that are out there.
So the expectation is that this would be rolled into the base spec for the standards track version.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Further comments, questions on the multiple singing algorithms? Sorry, signing. I'm just thinking back to Cabaret again.
Yeah.
Steve Jones says, okay, offline comment. I don't know if that means that he doesn't want me to say it, but I'll say it anyway. If I remember correctly, the usage doc for ARC was originally needed to explain why and how people would make use of ARC. If those questions are now answered in the main spec, great. If not, maybe retitle an experimental recommendation guide.
Yeah.
Agreed that a usage guide should be produced based on real world experience. Existing guide was to help us get to that point. All true.
Yep. So we'll see what we do with it. Maybe we'll just leave it as a draft, as a place to collect information and publish updates as we go.
Okay.
So now,
now Murray, get up.
Murray can leap to the microphone once again.
And here's Murray.
Good morning.
7601.
7601 BIS. I don't have anything outstanding. I was holding on to it just to make sure that Alexi was comfortable with us dragging a whole bunch of issues that have nothing to do with DMARC into this update, just for the sake of not doing multiple updates to one document. So with that clearance, now I have EAI stuff to add. I have a request from decrypt to add header.a into this. And I think that is all that I was waiting on. So I owe the working group one update that does those things.
Okay.
And then I think this is ready. I don't know what other feedback we'd want to get.
So I will note that and Alexei is chatting off mic here, which he should know better.
Bad boy.
You want to repeat it for him?
Go ahead. Here, I can hand it to you.
Is my understanding correct that version 00 is the same as RFC?
Yes, and 01 was the stuff.
And now Murray is off mic.
Is that 01?
Well, no, there is
There's
a
Murray 00, and there's Kucheravi 00, and there's working group 00. Those
Right,
are the
so
two.
you're
working
saying-
group 00 is the revised version.
Right.
Murray 00 or Kushirawi 00 is the copy of the existing doc.
And I did it that way so that you can see in the tracker, here's what changed between 7601 and
I was looking for this information. I didn't find it. All right. So your document needs to list changes since the last RFC.
Yes.
So this is the main thing, I'm looking at the document. If I couldn't find the diff, I need to know what's changed.
It's in the tracker, but it's in the tracker, but I can give you a little summary section at the end that says delete before publication or something.
No,
there's
this is
need
a
to-
requirement
yeah,
for BIS documents.
No need to delete it before publication.
Okay. No. So I owe you an update that has the EIS stuff, header.a, and it changes since the RFC.
Yes.
And so what this working group cares about in relation to what Murray just said is that we have agreed, we, the chairs and the AD, have agreed to put in some stuff that is not related to this working group in order to avoid a second rev of 7601.
Yes.
And that means that that is in the way of getting it published for us. We don't think that's a problem because we don't think it will cause any delay. I just wanted to make sure the working group was aware of that point.
Yep. That was the only reason I was waiting to do one more.
Yeah.
And Murray, before you leave the mic, since Tim is trying to shoulder you aside.
This is your 7601 biz, or this is the working group 7601 biz, and whereas it,
Oh, then I did take that out. It's 7601 bis has a diff to 7001, so I need to remove that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay.
I have some.
Do you have a realistic timeline
this week? Now that the embargo's up,
Oh, cool. Okay.
that's all lightweight late editing.
So
Okay,
you,
very
you
good.
could post that and we can go straight into working group last call.
You got it.
Sweet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nice. Working group last call coming soon to a theater near you.
Excellent.
All right, that takes care of the other documents that are currently in. And so we now get to the next steps, which is where we're nice and early. We have plenty of time for that, which is what I had hoped for. We'll start off with one of the goals of this working group was to document the issues that the community has with the operation of DMARC as it is, and then look at what we need to do to get us to a standard version of DMARC. ARC is one step in that of helping us resolve some of the issues that DMARC is causing. Assuming ARC actually does help with this, what do we need to do as a working group to move forward to a proposed standard version of DMARC?
So I'll ask the first question of, you predicated that there was an assumption that you were predicating upon there that ARC actually works to mitigate those problems. Does that mean that we need to put everything on the shelf for some period of time until we get ARC enough operational experience across a large enough set of operators to know that ARC does or does not mitigate the problems?
As a participant, my opinion of that is we don't need to wait. We may not want to publish a proposed standard version before we have more experience with ARC, but that doesn't mean we necessarily need to wait to work on it. So if we
okay.
have a direction we think we need to go, then I see that we can move forward while we are doing the experiment. I know Dave has some comments. Would you like to voice things here, Dave? Anyone in the room have anything to say? Here's Dave. Dave Crocker, given the degree of IETF objection to DMARC's lack of comfortable processing through intermediaries, I doubt DMARC can go without it, where it, I presume, means some success in ARC or a similar mitigation. Yes, he says. And Neil is trapped, madly trying to get to a microphone. Here comes Neil Jenkins, so he doesn't even have to say his name. Go for it.
Great. Yeah, I just want to make a comment that I think we do need to have some time with ARC in practice whilst implemented to see if this resolves those issues, because the big important part of this is whether providers can build up a trust relationship on which ARC seals they are going to trust, because just because you know it's come from someone else now, but that doesn't mean you necessarily know whether that's a good thing or not. And so
we already know that they can, because we have that demonstrated and attested to by certain large providers who have already done so.
Okay, fine.
Whether they will or not is another question, and not all will.
Yeah,
but they can.
Okay, I get maybe then I should rephrase that as with my Fastmail hat on, a slightly smaller provider. We are implementing this and have implemented quite a lot of it, but not quite the rest of it yet. We have yet to see whether we get sufficient volume, I guess, to build up the trust mechanisms that we can accurately use this, I guess, and whether that can be extrapolated out to other providers of a similar scale.
Fair enough. I know that in conversations with various folks in the MOG environment, that the concern of how much volume is necessary to get a sufficient sort of bootstrapping is an open question.
Tim points out a list of DMARC interop issues in our wiki, and you can check Jabber for that link, or you can just look at the wiki. Dave says, I suggest documenting DMARC experience, issues, and projected changes that are believed sufficient to justify standardization. Get working group consensus on the doc, then circulate it to the IETF and the IASG soliciting comments. This would serve as a non-binding community feedback exercise.
Bron Gondwana, I have another point, I guess, to put to that, which is it's easy to confirm that everything works when people aren't trying to abuse it yet. We won't really know if it works until people try to abuse it.
Quite. And so we have the issue that with an ARC chain, you may have multiple ARC sets in there of different domains. At the end, you have to make a decision of whether that ARC chain is okay to override the DMARC policy of the sender. And that is totally out of scope of the spec, but everybody has to make that decision, and we don't know how that decision will be made or how abusive domains in the ARC, in an ARC set from an abusive domain may be dealt with.
That's the important.
And Neil says that's the important bit. Jim.
Jim Fenton again. I think one thing that we should consider is that there are going to be some use cases for email that are going to break with DMARC plus ARC. I mean, the one that I can think of is the send this news article to a friend, where basically the newspaper site spoofs your email address. Now, we can decide whether those are important or not. I'm just kind of pointing out that those exist.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we should...
Let me clarify there. Why do you think that breaks with DMARC plus ARC? My view of that is it breaks with DMARC, but ARC is intended to help with that situation.
No, ARC actually doesn't help with that at all.
It's explicit spoofing.
Yeah, but okay.
It's spoofing without authorization, because there's no way that you can prove that you authorized the New York Times to send that article to me.
I see it as a similar thing to the mailing list. You like the IETF mailing list. You like the New York Times. Whatever like.
But you can like the New York Times today. ARC doesn't bring anything to that.
Okay. Yes, I'll buy that. It's the precedent that ARC sets. That ARC is setting up an expectation that you're going to use some sort of reputation or trust system to agree that this ARC chain is okay, and you can apply that same reasoning to the New York Times forwarding thing. But anyway, okay. I interrupted your point, so
that's fine. You could do that. In any case, what we might want to consider, and maybe this is something that can be done in parallel with the experimentation, is what sort of breakages might be acceptable breakages and what sorts of breakages might not be acceptable breakages. This is just sort of a hypothetical I'm throwing out that some things are going to break, and we might want to think in advance about what the criteria are that we're going to use when we do get the experimental results.
Okay.
Well, and that might be something that we address in going to the proposed standard. Is we take the 7960 list of problems and we explicitly address them as a portion of the proposed standard DMARC spec.
Yes, it may be that the New York Times forwarding issue is part of a standard spec that says apply the same sort of trust and reputation stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Tim
it might
Dragon points out, by the way, on
Dave says Barry's point is worth a separate, careful discussion. It's not the first time this scenario has come up for ARC. It might not be possible to make it work adequately, but I think it might actually be useful. And Tim says, of all the identified interop issues, calendaring is one of the sharper unaddressed breakage points. So he's bringing up something we haven't talked about here yet. Dave continues, here's a teaser for why it might work. Normal use of ARC requires having a basis for trusting the first ARC signer. So would the third-party origination. Yes, that's the point I was trying to make.
Okay.
And Steve Jones says both are origination of a message at a third party. ARC isn't designed for this. So yes, this is part of the discussion of how DMARC could be a standard, not necessarily an ARC
Yeah.
discussion.
And I'm thinking, I'm not sure if Steve was replying to Tim's point about calendaring or.
I think of Dave's
On Dave's, okay.
point. Neil.
Yeah, Neil Jenkins, could you clarify, sorry, what the calendaring issue was that?
Tim, would you care to expand upon your comment with calendaring?
While he's doing that, while he's typing up, forwarding
Oh.
of calendar invites.
So right now on most platforms, if you invite me to a meeting and I forward that to Barry because I want him to join the meeting as well, it forwards it as if you originated it. So essentially it spoofs your address when I originate the forwarded invite.
I don't think
That-
it does,
that seems-
because
yes,
normally
yes, most-
if you're
most.
forwarding the email, that's just email.
Right,
You're
that-
just
But
That
if
seems
you're
like a-
if you're taking a calendar object and you're adding a new guest to the list.
But that seems like breakage, and it seems like the calendar stuff is doing it wrong.
I would argue one way that's open to discussion, I believe, and maybe we defer that to
Yeah,
Cal
Are you-
Text or whatever the right group is for that.
Are you forwarding the email that contains the
No.
attached invitation?
No.
You're
You're
in
taking
your
the
calendar app, you're saying forward this invitation to Kurt.
or
you're
invite Barry
using the
to this
delegate
meeting as well.
function
yes.
of
Saying,
iCalendar.
add this person as an invitee.
right. Okay,
And so there's no need, I don't see a need that the email that creates has to spoof the sender, because all the information is in the ICS file.
yes.
But that's a discussion that has to be had in the right venue, and we are not it. But it certainly is an issue.
And Dave Crocker points out that as the host of a meeting, I want calendaring mail about that event to be on my behalf, which means it's best if it is quote unquote from me.
Okay, so Dave is saying the opposite of what I just said, and that's so.
Anyway,
discussion needs to be had.
we'll move that to a calendaring sort of space, but there is definitely observed problems in that.
All right. Seth says ARC helps where an intermediary breaks authentication information, allowing it to be encapsulated and transmitted. When the originator never authenticates properly to begin with, that's out of scope. And I'll point out to Seth, we're not talking about ARC anymore. We are talking about the DMARC spec and how we get that to proposed standards. So let's get out of the thinking mode that we're talking about ARC right now. Other comments about what we need to do to move DMARC forward?
One of the topics we touched on earlier in the meeting was this idea that there are three slightly distinct, or at least there's a sender and receiver side with kind of an optional reporting component to DMARC. Would it be helpful to restructure the spec to acknowledge the fact that there's very different levels of work and work involved for each of those parties compared to the way it's structured now, which is perhaps not quite as explicit about those roles, so that you can't necessarily say, I've implemented DMARC and have somebody understand what that means.
Right. So Kurt is pointing out perhaps we need to restructure the DMARC spec as part of the proposed standard
Yeah.
version. Seth reminds us that Dave called out we should get open issues with DMARC into the issue tracker. We do have them in the wiki, but we should create a separate tracker issue for each. The chairs will take on the responsibility for that. Murray sticks his thumb up in the air, and everybody else is reading their emails. So are we done with this topic for now? There's clearly a lot more discussion that has to go on with this. Is there more that we can benefit from the face-to-face time we have? Because we still have a little time
I'm
for that.
still feeling like I don't know what the next step is. We've had this discussion, we've identified some open issues, some of which we knew about before that we continue to chew on. But the nominal next step that was identified according to our charter was writing up this usage of DMARC sort of document, which is still sort of an open question about, does that bring value? Is that a necessary precondition to moving DMARC to proposed standard?
Okay, I'll leave that question open. Well, Tim says draft DMARC usage guide required to exit phase 2 is an expired milestone. I will say I think the very next step is, as we've said, to separate out the issues that remain with DMARC that need to be dealt with as we move it forward and start discussing how we resolve those issues. And Tim says, no, not an expired milestone, sorry, an expired doc.
Right, it's an expired doc,
Right.
and I think that some of the mailing list conversation recently was around the point of, we have a document, albeit expired, and that seemed to meet the official definition of having a doc for the milestone. So we could, in theory, exit phase 2, but then it's unclear whether we can move on past phase 3 if this is a charter required production
Do
artifact.
we think we need an approved usage guide before we start moving on the issues with the DMARC spec? I don't think so.
I don't think
But
so either,
I'm
but
looking for other comments. Jim?
Just looking at the file name of the draft, it looks like the draft is an individual as opposed to a working group draft. So you can at least get 6 months by adopting it as a working group draft and reissuing it.
We can indeed. So the
Tim says yay.
Tim is the has the pen on the DMARC usage guide. Should we give Tim the go ahead to post that as a working group draft to get us moving on that? Does anyone object to doing that and using Tim's version as a starting point for the DMARC usage guide? Hearing and seeing no objections, I will post that to the list for objections and give it a week or two, and then we'll move on. Further discussion on moving DMARC forward. Okay. And then there are a couple of items that
Alexi's jumping up.
I think it's fine to start working on it before ARC is finished. My only concern is I would like ARC to be done,
Oh, yeah.
as you know.
We have every plan to do that.
Yes.
Okay.
Be assured your chairs will not rest until ARC is in the publication queue.
Or they drop from exhaustion, right?
Or we drop from exhaustion or lack of coffee. Okay, Kurt has, he's sitting next to me, so I think he's Tim. You understand that, right? Kurt has 2 issues that he picked up from a discussion with NCSC, so go for it.
Sure. The first one here, we surfaced on the list a couple of months ago, and they have observed through their magical DMARC reporting analysis software that people are attempting to spoof domains that do not exist under gov.uk. And because of the methodology for figuring out what domain to query, there is no way to, in a straightforward sense, protect a non-existent org domain, because one never queries the org-1 or the last public domain to get a record that says, hey, if something doesn't exist, then it shouldn't be sending mail. And apparently a lot of people, a lot of receivers don't necessarily say, if the domain doesn't exist, maybe I shouldn't accept mail. So the question is this something that, other than having a trick DNS server, which will answer with text records that say, send me a report of all these people who are attempting to spoof non-existent domains, is there a good way to deal with this?
And just to clarify, we're talking about getting this division from the public suffix list. This is sort of the debound problem, some aspect of the debound problem.
Yeah, at the moment, we're still relying on the existing PSL-driven org domain definition, but even if we came up with a different mechanism, the problem would still exist.
And Seth points out that this is being seen with other domains. It's a real issue. with just .gov and .microsoft and .bank.
Yeah, dotless domains especially have this issue.
Dotless domains? We don't have dotless domains. No.
Neil Jenkins. I'm just wondering whether this is actually going to buy you much. If the receiver could check if, I guess, sorry, actually I take that back. I'm thinking through I was thinking if the receiver's not checking whether the domain just doesn't exist, then it's unlikely to do DMARC checks as well. But actually the domain does exist. It's just this subdomain.
Right.
It's not
Correct. So
identifying.
let's say, for example, junk.gov.uk does not exist, or the one that they point out is actively abused is tax.gov.uk. It does not exist, and yet there are quite a few fraud things going on, and apparently getting through to people's mailboxes because the receivers are accepting the mail and then saying, "Oh yeah, I happily accepted 10 million messages from tax.gov.uk."
The point here is that gov.uk wants to say not just that mail that comes from gov.uk but is not authenticated should be rejected, but rather that mail that comes from any subdomain that doesn't exist of gov.uk should be rejected.
And that they should be told about it in an aggregate report.
And it's part of the report.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
I was going to say, I think there's an existing mechanism for saying I don't send any mail. I've forgotten off the top
Well,
of my
you
head.
still
what
have
it
to
is.
have, you still have to
domain
return
has
records.
to, right.
We
The
still
domain
have to
has
have
to be in the
records.
DNS to do that.
Yeah.
This
This is part of what, this is maybe something in the base DMARC for a standards track version.
And it could
have
be
to
the
consider.
problem. Yeah, I mean, it could be an addition to the spec. It could be a revision. The problem is that even if you say P equals reject by default on an NX domain, that doesn't give you a mechanism to get an aggregate report.
Right. So Dave says this seems both useful and unrelated to DMARC. Dave, do you still think it's unrelated? And Seth says it is related to DMARC because of how an organizational domain is defined. And there are instances where the organization is the top level and they no longer have control of DMARC policy. Okay, so I don't think that, yes, this is a good topic. I don't know that we need more FaceTime on this topic. I think we need to discuss this more after we start moving the spec. Dave says the relationship to DMARC needs to be made very careful, and I certainly agree with that. This whole issue is difficult.
Yep.
The second item from NCSC.
The second item is that they are finding in dealing with some of the organizations within their span of control that it would be very helpful to get slightly more information than is currently available in an aggregate report, and that they have indications from people that they would be willing to send more information, but they're not willing to send what's asked for in a forensic report. So their question was whether or not it would make sense to define something in between that could have a bit more information that would be helpful for a company, let's say, that is trying to figure out where weird bits of mail are emerging in a positive sense. So let's say they've got a marketing arm that has done something strange and they're emitting mail. It would be helpful to have a report that could help identify that weird mail stream without necessarily having to go as far as forensic reports.
Tim Wyszynski.
Wait.
Oh, sorry.
We have a couple on Jabber.
Go ahead.
Going back to the previous topic, Ned comments that he agrees he's not convinced that this should be addressed with DMARC. And Steve Jones says, perhaps we need to be clear how much freedom the report generator has with respect to what details are included in the forensic report. Tim.
Tim Wyszynski. They could set that TTL on that wildcard text record in gov.uk a lot higher than 1800 seconds. But your question about the between forensic and let's say you're a large enterprise company, let's say Salesforce, and you have marketing groups that are doing stuff you have no idea. You want to figure out who they are, but you don't want to block them.
Yep.
While you go track down and go,
That's
so
exactly the scenario.
this is
they're
exactly the
considering.
problem. One of the problems we're trying to solve.
Yep.
Yep.
So the basic thing here is, would it be useful to have another level of reporting in between
Right.
basic and forensic.
Consider it semi-aggregated, maybe.
Yeah.
And there's laughter in the room at that term.
Okay, Jim.
I'll mention one possible tie-in with what we were talking about with DMARC, which is the association with the from address in the email as opposed to the envelope address or other things. DMARC is the one place that we establish some relationship there, and I think if it were done outside of DMARC, that relationship would be a lot more tenuous.
Okay, and Alexi's coming to the mic.
I think my suggestion is, can somebody propose a text and we can have a look? What's missing?
I suggested that to them, and they said yes, they would be willing to throw something together. But I only met with them last Thursday, so we've not seen anything out of that yet. But yeah, we'll see what they have to propose or specifically request, and then Tim, maybe you would have something you could throw on the list as far as content you would find helpful.
So I'm sorry, I was distracted when Alexei made his comment. What was it about?
The request was to have some specifics proposed as to what would be in this semi-aggregated
Okay.
report.
The other Tim Wasinski, will also be glad to propose text for that.
Okay.
And it may be, yeah, we may have other report processors and folks that help companies move along the spectrum from none toward reject that may have some opinions as far as other information that could be helpful in accomplishing that work.
Steve Jones adds to his other comment that he hasn't looked recently, but perhaps one or two examples of an information-rich forensic report and a very heavily redacted forensic report. So in other words,
Right.
Steve, have the document include the examples. And Dave says, might be interesting to split the entire reporting mechanisms from the alignment requirement mechanism.
Can you
I would
expand
say,
on that, Dave?
I'm not quite sure what you're getting at there, Dave.
And I wonder if Dave is alluding to a conversation that came up pertaining to the fourth bullet slide here last week.
Perhaps. Reporting is more general, separate from field enforcement. That's what he says. And Steve Jones says inspect or separate doc is fine, but provide examples of the intermediate content flavor NCSC was suggesting.
Right. Yep. That's what we're going to have them put together for us. Dave.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments around this? It sounds like we need to go get some more follow-up from
Yes.
individuals.
Follow up from NCSC and then have them, will they join the discussion on the mailing list?
Yes, they will. There have been some of them along the way.
Okay. Excellent.
So I need to find the next document here.
Yes, we're now into the DMARC verification without record definitions. So do we have a speaker for the slides on that? Who's going to present that?
Hang on for just a minute
Okay.
while I find the slides.
Yes, please come up here and stand in the pink box so the camera can see you. And the slides are up.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm Genki Yasutaka, so Rakuten. So thank you for joining. Thank you for your time for this draft. So today, so especially so yeah, thanks to so Buddy. So yeah, so I'm here now. So and also so here, so David. So maybe so yeah, he will help me. Yeah, so if necessary, because so unfortunately, so my English so sometimes apply and also some misleader so to someone. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to stand a little closer to the microphone, please.
Okay.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, here is the agenda. So maybe so yeah, this time as I'd like to share about the so virtual DMARC again. Yeah, and also so I would have very happy so if you could interesting or concern something about the, so this document. So that's it's good opportunity for you and us to join us discussion mailing list or our activity or especially to implement for this virtual DMARC. So yeah. So what is virtual DMARC again? So maybe so so there are cases where DMARC evaluation to pass even without DMARC record. Receiver can verify such a result to DMARC as treat as DMARC pass. So so far we name this mechanism as virtual DMARC. So here is an overview for virtual DMARC. So so as you can see, maybe at the current document, so maybe our scope is only alignment without DMARC record. Maybe in some cases we can treat not known but pass resulted pass. Here is so we simulate how virtual DMARC will be so efficient in cooperation with some Japanese ISPs. Maybe there were a million mailboxes and also major company in Japan. But he is only Japan limited result. Maybe I hope your overseas ISP company join our this verification result researchment. And also I will share how to calculate or simulate for this verification. So but as far as I confirm in only Japan, maybe virtual DMARC as in potential for treat as DMARC pass. So again, maybe I actually receive some comment. So maybe some people may have doubt about virtual DMARC. So I understand their opinion, but anyway, please discuss about virtual DMARC with you again. So why virtual DMARC? So maybe but the value of a DMARC two things. Maybe virtual DMARC contribute number one deliver legitimated email. And also
Sorry.
okay.
I'm not sure when you need the slide change, so.
So and also maybe why we need to document for virtual DMARC. So Microsoft has already adopted best guess pass for original DMARC policy. And the other is we already understand there are difference between virtual DMARC and original DMARC specification. So in case of no DMARC record, authentic layout quality should be known at the current DMARC, original DMARC. But I'd like to change this point in phase 3 in DMARC working group. And also, here is current update. So we are not only documentation, but also we already started implement testing. One of Middletown program, and also maybe in the future, we will support this Open DMARC. And also, I understand. So we need to more and more discuss about some issue. So actually, some members comment to us about our document. So finally, what the next? So as I mentioned before, we need to implement virtual DMARC on open source other than EMRA, and also the development of virtual DMARC on receiver other than Microsoft or acquire the latest information on effective virtual DMARC, not only Japan ISP but also overseas ISP or mail providers. And also, so discussion, so lastly, is there any possibilities to treat working group item or continue to discussion in this working group for virtual DMARC? And I hope maybe can we do this document together? So
Okay, so
Okay, this is Barry Lieba. I have a comment as a participant. I don't get it. We already have SPF tests or fails, passes or fails, and we have that's recorded in the authentication results. And we have DKIM passes or fails, and that's recorded in the authentication results. DMARC is meant to do two things: provide a policy from the original sender, the purported sender, and specify a mechanism for reporting. If they are not publishing a DMARC record, that's out of the picture.
well, but
So we have,
can I interject?
yes,
It also brings the concept of alignment into the picture.
but so does SPF. But I'm not getting how, without a DMARC record published, I don't see the value in putting a DMARC result in authentication results. We have an SPF result and we have a DKIM result. And then we already have people making their decisions on delivering the message based on those two results. I don't see how putting a DMARC authentication results when there is no DMARC record benefits us.
Neil Jenkins. I agree with Barry. I don't think there's any information you're adding that's not already present in the authentication results. And acting on this information is, if there's no policy from the sender at this point, it's just whatever policies or the receiver is deciding to implement. So there's nothing really standardized there. I guess you could make some recommendations of things that might work in the real world, but really this is all the receiver's responsibility to work out. If someone is a sender not publishing a DMARC but seems to be always signing stuff, they might want to do something with unsigned stuff from them, but that's up to the receiver. That's not really related to this.
Well, I think I would interject. Oh, sorry, Dave had a mic comment here. Go ahead.
Dave says, consider this as independent of DMARC. Consider whether it's useful for a receiving filter engine to know that there is no from field alignment. It's an added evaluation point, not a policy assertion. So I guess the one thing, SPF already has that. So the one thing we're adding.
No, SPF.
Well, it's not a from field, right? It's
the
mail
5321.
from.
Yeah.
But
So,
the authentication results already include this information, the sufficient information to be able to determine this.
Right.
No, I mean
Is
the
that something we've
authentication
added to
results
ours?
in the absence. Well,
they
Because
tell you,
it says the SPF from the domain that was verified.
correct.
And
the
you
DKIM
have the
domain
from-
that was verified.
Yes, and you have the from head.
field.
So you can do any alignment you want
do
to
this.
in the filter. Yes.
Is it valuable to have a separate authentication results header that aligns them
That
when
says
we're already doing that alignment? And yeah, I
the
don't know.
information is there. That's a fair point. So okay. Yeah.
So I have, again, not chairing here, I have a mild objection to accepting this as extra work for the working group when I don't think it has any significant value. Yes.
Rolf Sonneveld, if you don't have a DMARC record published, you can't even send a report back to the domain.
Correct.
So any change in the authentication, authorization stuff makes no sense, I think.
Yeah, I understand. So yeah, this is one of the discussion points. Yeah.
Tim.
Tim Wasinski, I would wait till DMARC's standardized before you start thinking about sort of hacking around the edges of it, sort of thing, right?
True. I don't think if we were to accept this, I don't think we would do it now.
Yeah.
But it's worth bringing this forward now and discussing whether we think it
Yeah.
has value. As I said, I'm reluctant to spend resources of the working group on something with such little value.
Agreed. Also, my other comment was, if you haven't signed a blue sheet, please do so.
Yep.
I'll leave them right here.
Okay, we have 2 more minutes for further discussion of this or anything else you want to bring up. Is there any more discussion of the virtual DMARC?
So
idea?
I guess I'll ask the question, why do you feel that this is, given that all the information is already there, that you're already making your own decisions on the basis of all of this information, why try to call this anything DMARC?
Some of us are saying we don't see added value in this. What do you think the added value is that you would come back to us with?
Okay.
So. And while they're discussing this, are there any other things we need to discuss in the 30 seconds we have left? Ned Fried says, boil it down. Exactly what is this additional header field telling us? Yes, that's what several of us are asking. And anything else we need to discuss? Okay,
Sorry.
Go ahead. Okay. Thank you. Please.
Do you have an answer or?
Could you please, few minutes, maybe, I will send an email by today or tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Okay, on the list.
Excellent.
Excellent.
So we will
Okay.
follow up on this discussion on the list. And unless there's anything truly urgent, I think we are adjourning. Seeing nothing, I think we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Thank
And
you to all the remote people.
I just want to add one thing that Steve Jones just said. The only place this would be seen is within the receiver, or if the message is forwarded, the receiver is free to do whatever they want internally. What would be the impact of an additional DMARC equals value if the message is forwarded? Answer discussion on the list. And thank you particularly to the remote participants for spending the time with us. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Yes, I'm afraid, but these guys might not.
Okay, and I took notes, so I'm good with, I will do the minutes.
Okay,
So-
if you wish, you can refer to this document. It's on Bitly at IETF101-DMARC. No punctuation in it. It was right at the top of our